Welcome in, everybody, as people enter. We're just getting started here. Welcome, everybody, to our Joliet Greenway Neighborhood Planning Study virtual meeting series. This is the second meeting in our series of 5 meetings, and tonight we're going to be focusing on mobility and access. And so as you all enter, I ask that you please drop down into the chat and add your name and neighborhood so that we know where our residents are viewing from. Again, as you enter, go ahead and drop your name and neighborhood in the chat so that we know where our residents are viewing from this evening. I want to definitely say thank you again for being here with us this evening in the comfort of your warm home, hopefully. My name is Joseph Kemp. I'm the Community Engagement Manager for the Joe Louis Greenway Neighborhood Planning Study. And this tonight's agenda, we are going to talk about the Neighborhood Planning Study, what we heard from community as we've been doing community engagement for the past year, what we found through the data analysis that we've been conducting. Also, we're going to go over some draft strategies and ideas. We'll have time for questions and breakout discussions. And also, finally, we'll have next steps. Throughout the presentation, you can always drop in the comments and drop any questions or comments that you have in the chat so that when Q&A comes around, we can get to those and answer some of those questions. And so the Greenway itself is a recreational pathway that will traverse the city, crossing multiple neighborhoods, unifying communities and green spaces. We want to be intentional about creating equitable spaces through arts, programming, and economic opportunities for all Detroiters. And so introductions, as this slide shows you everyone who's working on the planning study as it is. Led by the City Planning and Development Department, we have been in collaboration across departments, as well as working with our consultant team, Interface Studios, and sub-consultants that have a wide range of knowledge, working both locally and nationally on community development projects similar to the JOG. And also focused on the present and future of the Greenway, the Joe Louis Greenway Partnership is a nonprofit that was formed to ensure the Joe Louis Greenway is a space that benefits Detroit neighborhoods in an equitable way. With Executive Director Leona Metley at the helm, the organization is focused on the future programming of the Greenway, as well as community engagement that will lead to further community development. And the planning study process builds off of the model set forth by the original framework, which incorporated a Citizens Advisory Council. And so we developed our own version of this called the Community Leadership Team. These individuals are residents of the neighborhoods around the Greenway that are tapped into the community social networks, but also have been a huge help with community engagement and reviewing draft materials. Through them, we're able to examine more place-based strategies and also gauge if we're moving in the right direction. And so, as I spoke about before, the initial Joe Louis Greenway framework plan released in 2021 laid the foundation for what we're doing today. The major goals from that plan are to enhance quality of life and promote community development, promote equity, and also improve the transportation network within the city. And so as we're looking at models locally, we also know that there are projects around the United States that we can look to for examples. We know that looking at other major Greenway projects across the country, that Greenways can have an incredible impact on neighborhoods. And we also don't know exactly how or when the JOG will impact neighborhoods, but we want to understand that there may be fears and of familiar spaces gentrifying as a result of development of this scale. That concern can exist, even at the same time there's aspiration to see change in your neighborhood. And still, even with the Greenway investment, there are challenges to achieving impacts identified in the framework plan. The planning study is an opportunity to better evaluate and plan for potential economic impacts with community. And so while the original framework that was released in 2021 focused on those goals for the Greenway itself, the neighborhood planning study that we are going through right now is about making sure investments in the Greenway benefit the neighboring communities. We are developing strategies through analysis and community engagement affecting these emerging topics. So the topics that you see before you: creating and sustaining jobs, organizational capacity within the community, housing affordability, neighborhood improvements, building wealth, and connectivity and mobility, which we're talking about tonight. And so this is our overall engagement timeline. Last year, we began meetings in all 5 of the planning areas within the root of the JOG. The community leadership teams then followed up with hosting small group meetings to talk to residents. And then we also had a vacant land summit last summer, which was well attended, and a series of neighborhood walks with residents, which we titled Moving Talks. And this gave residents a safe space to talk about current neighborhood conditions and priorities for the community in the future. And now we're here at meeting 2 of the virtual meeting series, and we will return in person this spring to have meetings to talk about and gather further feedback on all of these things before our summer celebration. We want to be intentional about our process and making sure all materials and information is accessible to residents. The size and scope of this project gives us an opportunity to talk about these things with a broad range of the city's population. And so here's a photo of us during the Movie Talk training, where we collaborated with CLT and also other city departments to develop our Move and Talk engagement. This is a picture of one of the members of DPW talking about their current initiatives to the group of community leadership team members. This is also a picture, a few pictures from a few of the Move and Talk engagements that we've had, where residents were able to, talk about the things about their community, both past, present, and future. And so we've taken all of what we heard from those engagements and formed some draft strategies. And so tonight we're going to be diving into ideas about mobility, transportation, and accessing the Greenway. As you're listening to the presentation that we're about to give, think about the strategies being presented and how they apply to your neighborhood in the section of the Joe Louis Greenway that is closest to you. Are there strategies you'd like to change? Do you have any concerns? Are we going in the right direction in terms of the strategies that we present? Is there any idea that excites you particularly? And are there any ideas that we should be thinking about when it comes to mobility? We're really looking for feedback so we can start applying these strategies to each planning area and this spring. After a short presentation tonight, we'll break out into small groups and listen to feedback. And throughout the presentation, you'll also have a chance to answer questions along the way that will, before we go into the breakout. So there's multiple touch points of feedback that you can give. All right, and now I'm going to pass it over to Carolyn from our consultant team to talk about the key questions that we'll be examining about mobility tonight.
Great, thank you, Joseph. Welcome everyone. I am excited to be here with you. I am Carolyn Lush. I am a transportation planner with Smith Group, one of the consultants. And we are going to get started by thinking about some of these key questions that we had in mind as we were developing some of these initial recommendations and ideas for transportation and access around the Greenway. So we want the Greenway to contribute to the local and regional general mobility access. We want it to be part of the overall context and the overall network of mobility in the region. We want to learn from you, from your local context, from your daily experiences, what the barriers are that might exist to accessing the Greenway, and also what your motivations might be for using it. We would like to know how the Greenway can be used for daily commutes. We want it to be a really practical tool for people to get around, and know also what modes of transportation people might use, whether it be biking, walking, or some other form of micromobility or anything else like that. We want to know from you, based on your local experience, what are the neighborhood destinations that you want to get to using the Greenway, and what routes can we prioritize to connect to those destinations? And then where do we need some extra wayfinding or signage to get to those destinations? And what other infrastructure improvements do we need in some of these places, areas where maybe we need to see some traffic calming, or where we need additional facilities for pedestrians or bicyclists or bus riders? All right, and now we're going to do a poll just to know how you generally move around your neighborhood and the city. Just click whichever one you normally use the most, and we're interested to see what results we get. All right, so got lots of responses coming in here. Very good. All right, maybe just a couple more seconds here. Okay. All right. So as you can see, we have a lot of folks who are moving around by car, which is understandable, because we have a lot of infrastructure built for cars in the city. But we also have some big chunks that are biking and walking, or maybe using an assisted mobility device, a good chunk of public transit, and a little bit for electric bike scooter. So that's a nice range. Awesome. All right. Thanks, Joseph. Okay. So when we are looking at this JLG neighborhood study, we are building on a lot of work that has already been done by the city and other partners, and that is in progress. So there are a lot of mobility initiatives going on right now. We have the Office of Mobility Innovation working on several projects. We have the Safe Routes to School projects. DDOT is in the midst of their DDOT Reimagined process to sort of look at how they can bring more frequent service to a lot of the lines that see high ridership. And then recently, the Streets for People plan was also put out by the city, which gives some really specific recommendations for how we can design roads to be more safe for all users, and also where we need to look at some of those changes. And then there's, of course, the Sidewalk Repair Program and MOGO, their ongoing efforts and their accessibility. So that, there are other programs as well, but that's just a sampling of the stuff we're going to be building on here. So this is just to give you an idea. We're just going to look at these really detailed maps for the west side to give you an example. This is where we are looking at some of the factors that play into our analysis of where we might need to see some of these connections happen. So first, we were looking at where the destinations are, where things are that might draw people to the Greenway and things that people might want to access from the Greenway. So some of the factors we're looking at on this map are where job centers are. You can see those with the dark red dots. We're looking at population density, where there's a greater concentration of people living. We're looking at where schools and parks are located. And we're looking at how that all relates to the access points for the JLG. Great. And then another category of factors we're looking at is the existing connections and planned connections. So here, the red, the red that you see there, that is the sort of walk shed. So where you can get to for walking about a 1/4 mile distance. So that's seen as, kind of a reasonable walk for many people. And then you can also see here we have the Connect 10 routes in the darker green for DDOT. Those are the really frequent ones. And then we also have on here the existing bike lanes and some of the planned slow streets that were identified in the streets for people plan. That'll be sort of neighborhood bicycle connectors with traffic calming on them. So looking at where all of those connections, how they relate to the access points on the Greenway. And then another category of things we're looking at is the challenges that we see when looking at access to the Greenway. The purple there on this map is the industrial segments. So that can be a challenge when we have, people who want to access the Greenway, but there are large industrial sites that are sort of blocking access. We also have on here truck routes in the light blue, so that can be an issue with heavy truck traffic. And then the dark red lines are the high injury network. So that was something that was analyzed in Streets for People to see where the really serious crashes happen in the city. So we want to make sure that we are looking at those segments and making sure that we are addressing safety there. And then you can see all of these yellow points. These are from the city's sidewalk reporter collector. So we also, of course, have a lot of sidewalk maintenance issues in the area. So looking at all of those factors, bringing them together, and then also talking to folks in the move-in talks that we did and the various other engagement activities, we define these 5 really broad goals for what this study should do. So one is just providing those safe resident connections to residents who are close to the Greenway and reinforcing the connection to those assets that exist in the neighborhood. Another one is reducing the conflicts that exist, especially with industrial traffic, with truck routes, and those really high intensity, high injury networks. Improving transit access. And that is, we're going to look at those high volume transit lines where we have high frequency, high ridership, and find nodes where we can really improve those connections. And then improving safe bike approaches and transitions to the Greenway and connecting existing bike infrastructure and seeing where it can be improved and where we can connect with those slow streets. And then the last one is accommodating car access where it makes sense. So primary trailhead parking, still having an emphasis on multimodal connections there with mobility hubs, and also making use of existing on-street parking where it makes sense. So now we have another poll. Looking at all of these, what are your top 3 priorities? So you can go ahead and answer that now. All right. Just a couple more seconds here. You want to get your answer in? Okay. We can look at this. Okay, so safe resident connections is definitely the runaway favorite here, which makes sense. But some big chunks for reducing conflicts and transit access and bike access, and a considerable chunk as well for accommodating car access. So that's also a really good mix. But I think definitely seeing that those safe resident connections are a big priority. All right. All right. So on that note, these are some of the points, some of the strategies that we're going to use to try to provide this safe resident connections. And here we have highlighted some potential focus areas very broadly based on the factors that we were looking at. We will definitely drill down into greater detail in our next round of meetings when we get into the neighborhood scale. But here we're just trying to pull out some nodes that may be important for each of these segments. And we definitely want your feedback on that as well. So we want to prioritize connections to residential neighborhoods, especially those higher density areas. We want to focus on mitigating the conflicts with the industrial land. Um, we want to look at those slow streets that were identified in Streets for People and see where that interacts with these. And then also making sure that we are going back and checking once we understand what the usership is on the parts of the GLG and making sure that we're adjusting the strategies to reflect that. And here are just some examples of places where we're looking at access to the JLG and making those connections. We got East Davis in there where we did where there's some sidewalk daylighting, and then also the Lumpkin Street where we're running into an industrial site there. All right, and then in the reducing conflict section, this is where we're going to look at where the JLG interacts with railways, highways, other like major arterials that have really fast, lots of traffic, and especially those truck routes. And we want to, in particular, look at putting these improvements, traffic calming improvements, at those high injury areas that have already been identified as problem spots. So here's some issues here. You can see we have some problems, of course, with vehicles parking in the bike lanes. And so that's one issue, especially with industrial traffic that we are going to look at. And then looking at some of the other industrial traffic up here, Prairie Road. All right, in terms of improving transit access, we want to really prioritize the lines that have a lot of ridership that lots of people really rely on. And so right now we're looking at those Connect 10 routes. And then we're also, in addition to those, looking ahead at the DDOT Reimagine plan and looking at those Tier 1 and Tier 2 lines that they identified that have 20-minute or greater frequency. So those are the blue lines. So those are where we want to focus a lot of these efforts for improving bus stop conditions and also improving the path from the bus stop to the Greenway for the pedestrian. And then supporting policies generally to improve bus reliability and frequency, which can be an issue, and then just staying in touch with DDOT and monitoring what goes on with DDOT Reimagined and where it goes from here. And you can see an example here just of a kind of enhanced bus stop which ideally there would be, some sort of shelter, at least like this, at those major nodes where it intersects with the Greenway. And then we have our goal here to improve bike infrastructure. So here we are looking, first of all, where there are already bike lanes and looking at where those intersect with the Greenway, or almost intersect with the Greenway, as is the case with Dexter, and looking at which of those might require enhancements, maybe looking at which ones might need some sort of separation, and also looking at the transition from the bike infrastructure to the Greenway. And then prioritizing implementation of the Streets for People plan and looking at those slow streets routes and which ones might be especially valuable for bicycle access to the Greenway, which ones might be preferable to more major roads for access to the Greenway. And then there are a couple of potential routes that we could look at as sort of an enhanced cross Greenway route. These are just some potential concepts. There's a sort of Chicago concept that could connect to Hamtramck, and then there's the Warren concept there, and those are things that could receive extra enhancement to make that connection across. And then in addition, we want to improve access to bikes. And so part of this is working to expand MOGO around the Greenway. And these are some potential sites where MOGO expansions could be located in the red. The yellow dots are the existing MOGO stations. So there's certainly a lot of room for expansion along the Greenway. And then also looking at alternatives if there are some strategic partnerships that could be pursued with institutions, with employers to support some bike access programs. And then we also need to look at the parking access and where we want to prioritize that, where we want to site parking lots as opposed to relying more on street parking. So we want to prioritize parking lots that have amenities that potentially have EV charging and other mobility options, maybe scooters or bike share at those really big primary trailheads. And then we want to aim for at least every 2 miles for that so that they're well distributed around the Greenway. And other spots where that isn't there, we want to try to utilize the on-street parking. And there may be opportunities also to partner with businesses or institutions to have agreements for using parking lots if that's necessary. So that's definitely, we want to balance that. We want to use the existing multimodal resources that we have, but also provide the parking so that everybody is able to access it. And here's a little mock-up of just something that could be put in for an EV charging station. This is the existing Joy Road trailhead with an EV charging station sketched in there. So you can see like this might be one of the amenities that would be provided at stations like this, in addition to, hopefully some bike share, scooters, other amenities. In some cases, we're hoping that there will be opportunities to put in what we call a mobility hub. And you can see that there was a pilot temporary mobility hub put in by Michigan Central Station. So these are where you combine several modes of transportation so that you can make those linkages really easily. So you might have bike and scooter share charging stations. It would be a bus stop for a high frequency line. You might even have some public art, some placemaking, and then there would be wayfinding signage to get to the Greenway from where that is if it's not right on the Greenway. So this is just a big, broad overview of some of the goals that we've looked at and where we are suggesting we potentially locate them on some of these nodes around the Greenway. So some of them are more just a focus for public transportation or bicycling, and some of them you can see are really potential locations for multimodal hubs because they bring all of these goals, all of these priorities together. All right. So now we are going to do some questions. We threw a lot at you, so feel free to throw your questions at us. But to make sure that we're, letting everybody speak and respecting our time, we're going to ask you to stick to 2 to 3 minutes per question. And Joseph, are we raising hands or putting in a chat or both?
Either or both will work. You can raise your hand or you can drop down and put your questions in the chat.
And we have had a couple questions come up during the presentation. So I think if there are specific sites or places that you have questions about, I know there's a question about the former Sears site, definitely follow up with us and we can have a conversation about that. The other point that was made was about bike rack programs, which is a great point. Thank you. And there was a question about bike lane maintenance that I would pass off to Adam, actually from the Department of Public Works, to speak a little bit about bike lane maintenance. And then going forward, yeah, please drop questions in the chat and raise your hand and we'll follow. Adam, are you?
Yep.
Yeah, great.
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, I saw the question about bike lane maintenance. I believe the question was mentioned Livernois specifically, but I'll speak to kind of bike lanes citywide. So there's kind of two answers here. So for the Greenway, the General Services Department will be managing all on-street bike lanes that are part of the Greenway, as well as all paths along the Greenway. So they'll be doing the landscaping, they'll be doing the snow maintenance, things like that. So the Greenway will be handled through the General Services Department. As far as other bike lanes, Livernois, for example, Department of Public Works is having conversations about equipment needs as far as machines and equipment that can fit in bike lanes specifically and can start to handle the snow maintenance in those specifically. So we understand that as our bike network expands across the city, we need to start taking account for maintenance and making sure that people are able to use these year round. We know that a lot of people are using these to get to work and other places. So these are conversations that are happening. We're looking to make sure that we can maintain anything that we put down in the future.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. The next question was, who are the organizing sponsors of the Greenway? So the Jolos Greenway is a project of the city of Detroit, and the Jolos Greenway Framework Plan, which was the planning that was published in 2021 with the design intent and overall framework, was also the General Services Department within the city of Detroit. However, it is a public-private partnership. There's a Joe Louis Greenway partnership that was established, as well as for the fundraising for the completion of the Greenway itself. There's the Unified Greenway Campaign, so working with the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy, which makes up a portion of the Joe Louis Greenway. And so those are some of the organizing elements, I suppose, the folks that are responsible for the Greenway. And if you want to clarify any more, I'm happy to ask you to unmute E. Davis to see if I answered your question properly. In terms of sponsors, and kind of interpreting that as the managers of the construction and fundraising for the project. I can send you a link to the project page for that. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. The next question from Ed, is the JLG considering physical barriers, i.e. curbs rather than poles like Livernois has, to create a physical barrier between cars and bikes? I think since that's related again to the design of the Greenway itself, I'll pass that over to Adam. And then I also just want to call out though that we really want to focus some of the feedback at this meeting to the neighborhood planning study. And so the idea is to focus on mobility connecting to and from the Greenway as well as other neighborhood issues. But I think it's always important for us to stay up to date on the project. So Adam, if you want to jump in there.
Yeah, thanks Ed for the question. Yes, so we are considering other things outside of flexible posts and bollars that you mentioned. It really is context specific. You know, we don't want to over design things in, you know, low stress environments already for people walking and biking. I'll say 2/3 of the Greenway is already off street in the former Conrail. About 1/3 of it is on street. You know, in areas where we need additional protection, yes, we are looking at curbs, jersey barriers, anything we can make it the most safe and comfortable facility for people walking and biking the Greenway.
Okay, thanks, Adam. There's also the question of how can nonprofits play an integral role in this project? I mentioned a couple, like the Riverfront Conservancy and the Joliet Greenway Partnership. But one of the key things that Joseph highlighted in the intro here is that with this planning study, organizational capacity is a critical piece that we're looking at in order to be able to implement the recommendations of the plan. And so I would say that it's almost at every level that nonprofits can get involved in the project. It really depends on the interest of your organization. And so if you have any specific questions around that, definitely reach out, and we can see what the opportunity is. But again, the idea behind the Greenway is really to be able to have an impact on the neighboring communities, and the way to make that happen is really going to be through public-private partnership. All right, so we have a couple hands now. Charday, I'll start with you. I think this will let you unmute.
Yeah, thank you. Considering, so I know we're speaking in the realm of mobility and community access to the various, you know, opportunities for transit. I'm thinking about our disabled community, and something that comes up very often is, and it's something so simple and basic, just a lack of rest opportunities like benches and chairs, or you know, just random seats along different routes. So I'm curious about if this has been considered and if it's if it's anywhere, you know, within the framework. So I know it's super broad, but I'd like to offer that.
Thank you so much for that point. And that was a really big consideration as we were planning for those move and talk events that Joseph mentioned, was really trying to understand with community what it feels like to move around through the community. I'll let Adam maybe jump in with any additional design elements to the Greenway itself, but there are benches planned coinciding with lighting and call boxes and those sort of things for the Greenway itself. I think that your point is a great one, though, as we consider these prioritized routes within the neighborhood to connect to the Greenway, to think about spaces there.
Yeah, Michelle, I'll just add to that. You know, all along the Greenway path, there are benches, resting places, as you mentioned. There are also trailheads, things like that for community gatherings and things like that. So it is something we're considering, but I really have details along the actual path. If we're talking kind of broader outside, then maybe Michelle or Joseph can weigh in.
Yeah, and that's exactly, this is the type of thing that as we get into those neighborhood area meetings in the spring, we'll want to be looking at specific routes and places within the community that might offer opportunity for that along different paths of travel. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Charday. Ms. Betty Garner, are you able to unmute?
Yes, can I be heard?
Yes.
Hello? Yes, good evening. My question was in regards to people who have mobility challenges. I hadn't heard any communication until now in regards to the walking. Have you thought about people who are in wheelchairs, using walkers, transport, chairs, things like that, as far as using the Greenway?
Yeah, so again, I think for the Greenway itself, it's being designed with universal design and ADA accessibility in mind. So it would meet all of those standards, and then alongside that, the maintenance to make sure that, you know, when there's snow, it's cleared and things like that for those paths on the Greenway. I think, you know, what we're really interested in through the neighborhood planning study is how you're accessing that Greenway in the first place, and whether that's where we're getting into things like sidewalk condition and crossings and intersections within the neighborhood. And so that's where we'd really love to hear from you what needs to be prioritized in terms of connecting destinations within your community to prioritize that level of service so that all users can access the Greenway. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and Sade, I saw in the chat, did you have something to add to your question prior?
As everyone's filtering back in, I hope that you guys all had great conversation, you know, understood the information that was presented to you, and also if you had any connections to make, you got contact information for those connections as well. Next steps, we had our commercial and small business meeting on Thursday, the 25th. Today was our mobility discussion. And we also have 3 more meetings coming up. So industry and jobs is February 1st. Housing is the 6th, and the vacant land to finish out the series is on February 8th. You can always stay tuned for information on our website, DetroitMI.gov/JLG planning. That's always a place that you can find our information, as well as you can reach out to us on social media at J. Lewis Greenway on Instagram and Joe Lewis Greenway on Facebook. If you had any questions or concerns from this meeting, you can also reach out to us at Joe Lewis Greenway at DetroitMI.gov. These presentations will be posted on our website, so you can go back and look at those strategies. And if you have something that you really want to reach out to us, you can always do so by reaching out to us via email and through our website. So I want to thank you again for being with us this evening, and hopefully we see you at the next one. Have a great evening, guys.